think that Stuxnet worm was used against Japan?
Not, no, but you know what, we don't know the consequences. Those systems in general used too old of programmable logic controllers to probably be the source of that. But again, worms and viruses can spread to systems other than those for which they were intended. This was pretty well focused on just Siemens brand running Windows. But you know, you can never say never. I'd say it's unlikely. One thing that Bill mentioned earlier, and I think David and a couple other people mentioned it too, there are no obsolete weapon systems on the bottom of the layer. And so you see these kind of foils all the time. Dave Webb showed you one of these, and I think Nat showed one. They're very similar foils that show the cyber warfare environment, the missile defense environment, and they all show these layers upon layers upon layers. And it makes you think, wow, if we have big systems up in space that combine the intelligence of microsatellites and drones, then there's nothing left on the ground. No. The tanks, those submarines, everything else stays. Programs like the National Aerospace Initiative just add layers of intelligence on top of the death that is already there. Well, let's see, what have I been going? Oh, I've gotten this frozen. Hold on 2 seconds. Oh, that's right. There we go. This is the program I was talking about earlier, National Aerospace Initiative. Ron Sega, the astronaut, was in charge of this for a long time. And they were talking about something called swarm intelligence. If you have clusters of drones, they can all operate in an autonomous mode as hive drones that have their own self-regulating mode. And people were so worried about the conscience, not conscious, conscience level of an autonomous drone that there is a professor, I believe in Reading in England, who is looking at giving drones a conscience so that the drone will say, I could strike here, but I really shouldn't. But this is indicative of the power of this force multiplication for drones and autonomous vehicles, that all of a sudden they are capable of making decisions in their own right. The myth, as I mentioned, involved in all this is that people keep telling us that as we move from aerial bombing to drone bombing, you get fewer civilian casualties. This book just came out. I was hoping to have a copy of it to show you, but you should be able to find it. Stephen Rockel, Inventing Collateral Damage. They've done studies on how the drones have been used in places like Pakistan and the Horn of Africa, and say drones are so compelling and so seductive to use that any advantage they give in limiting deaths around the periphery that would be used by regular aerial bombing is more than made up for by the greater number of drones that are used. So you end up with no fewer civilian deaths than you'd otherwise would. Now, what was mentioned beforehand is kind of the proliferation of drone technology we're going to see all over the place soon. Hummingbird, isn't that cute? Mostly this will be used for spying. But believe me, part of prompt global strike, part of that whole concept, is that you have weapon systems of any size, surveillance systems of any size, that can be deployed as widely as need be. You also have this mini drone, which is not quite as mini as this mini drone, a guy, really an oversized glider that then is launched, human form, the way you would a normal glider, but then operates under its own power to go into small areas. You have the MIT submarine drone that can do all kinds of undersea studies of audio phones, underwater, and potential anti-submarine warfare. The iRobot Incorporated Pack Robot has been used a lot already in IED detection, and that's a great thing. They're finding ways to bring robots out in great numbers with tanks and armored personnel carriers. And you're going to see a lot more of this at any point. Bill, interrupt me anytime that you'd like to bring up something.
I guess just one thing
Yeah.
I would, with my ideas, there's nothing new under the sun. We've had cruise missiles and we've also had shorter range missiles, which have been without pilots. The thing that drones brings in there is you get the drone back, and you can miniaturize it, and that's that seductive part, and make it easier to use or easier to rationalize that you're doing more specific targeting than say you would with a cruise missile. Huge bomb, but you send it from a long way away and ain't no people there, and so. A lot of the thinkers, I believe, were driven by, okay, how do we make it even more functional? We still get the concept that it's an airplane, but there's no pilot there. The pilot's somewhere else. Well, with all these missiles, that's been true for 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but you get it's like a recycle thing. You get it back, and it's also something new, and different people get rich off it. And a lot of weapon systems result from arms races between the military services. For example, the Air Force has been out front on this at CIA, but now the Army wants their own drones, and they want their own attack drones. They already have those little bird-sized ones.
Yeah.
But just that notion that a lot of this stuff is evolutionary, not really revolutionary.
Exactly. It's interesting you were speaking about evolution versus revolution. Before you know it, a sea change has taken place from what used to exist. Because, during the 70s, in the era of being concerned about CIA assassination attempts, there were laws put into Congress saying you cannot target an individual. All of a sudden, first there was the debate under Dick Cheney's office of do we hire a specific Blackwater Z team to have a ground-based assassination death squad team, or do we use those same people with a little more technical expertise added to run a drone program out of Shamsi, Pakistan that targets individuals for assassination? Well, February 2009, Obama said, this is the way we want to go primarily. But then with the bin Laden Abadiyad situation said, oh, but we should use SEAL Team 6s when necessary as well. And you'll notice that Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, just said 2 days ago, we assassinated bin Laden, and we're fully prepared to assassinate Zawahiri. And we will go after him, we do that. No capture, assassinate. This is now U.S. policy, and no one ever argued about this. I mean, this is... Well, yeah, the peace community. No one in Congress, not a single Democrat or Republican, because they think of it as easy. It's an easy solution to a problem. And all that talk about not assassinating foreign leaders is long gone. You've probably heard a little bit about prompt global strike, which is something that was dreamed up first at Strategic Command, August 2003, saying, let's find global ways to use conventional weapons, no nuclear weapons here, but conventional ones, in a round-the-world type of way. There was a lot of talk of even using submarine-launched missiles with conventional bombs to do immediate attack, and then Congress actually banned that because they said that was way too provocative. But they said, then let's use drones, smaller missiles, and space planes to be able to hit any spot on the world's surface in 2 hours. And so last April of 2010, 2 launches were made on the same day. One of a dwelling orbiting vehicle that came out of the Air Force and is highly classified, X-37B. The first launch did not land until about November, Matt? Does that not sound about right for the X-37? It landed before Christmas, I remember.
Yeah. Well, there was the cluster of the 3 different launches. So
yeah.
There was the Wave Rider, the HTV-2, and the X-37.
Right, and the 37. Well, this one came down right away.
The Wave Rider just crashed.
Crashed, right. And that's why I didn't count it, because it was dead.
But no, they ran another one 2 days ago. They just lost. It was in the press. Maybe in the last 36 hours.
Oh, wow.
So, success.
But with this guy, it's the equivalent of a robotic shuttle. And there is another one up there right now that was launched this spring. It's believed to do mostly intelligence testing rather than assault testing, but the same idea is there. The point to be made here is that some people, Noah Shockman at Wired and a few other people, believe that the Joint Chiefs had a quid pro quo with Obama that quite explicitly said, if you want your nuclear treaties to come out this year, this is a year ago in 2010, then we want your full support of conventional prompt global strike. There's no document that says this, but right around the time that the latest evolving of the Russia-US treaties came out was when the big hype campaign started for prompt global strike. And Jackie Cabasso last year from Western States was surprised that when they were doing some prompt global strike tests at Vandenberg, that the commanders were all talking about how wonderful nuclear-armed Minutemen are for war fighting. And she said, where's all the talk about deterrence? And I said, it's the era of prompt global strike. Nobody talks about nuclear deterrence anymore. This is the kind of stuff that requires just what Dave Webb was talking about this morning. You need global monitoring of the planet 24/7, which the National Security Agency and National Reconnaissance Office do for their own reasons, which has civilian implications, as Matt was mentioning, but it's also required for situational awareness of the planet. You need to have a network of bases and spy satellites up there all the time to make this stuff work. Now, I'm jumping a little bit kind of radically here to talk about the role of Cyber Command, because it's only been in the last year that we've formalized a civilian cyber control through the White House, but also a military cyber command that operates through the National Security Agency at Fort Meade. This is what I was mentioning, Stuxnet, the worm, which comes from sources in Israel, but Cyber Command at Fort Meade was believed to have played a support role in development of this. What they're doing, they don't talk at all. Cyber Command is more secretive than almost any other command in the entire formal Pentagon structure, because cyber defense and cyber offense is something they just don't want people to know about. And you quickly get lost in that kind of myriad that David will probably talk about further of when is an enemy and who is doing what. But it's been real obvious that Israel could point to Stuxnet as a way of slowing down the Iranian nuclear weapon development program in a way that Israel never had to confirm. But as we should see, you start playing games with cyber warfare and you end up with an arms race in its own right. Hold on, I'm going to fiddle with this again.